Good evening, all, or morning or afternoon, whenever you're watching this. I'm recording it at about 20 past 8 on, what is the day? Tuesday, the 1st of May. Um, I thought I would do something a bit different, or a horse race based video of you getting to see how I kind of research and dig into the odd micro angle and various different things, um, with the idea that, as you know, I kind of want to create a handful of angles within the test zone within section whatever that is, 3 of the members posts. We had some success during the jump season. And the idea really is just to create another kind of weigh in or set of starting points, or kind of non-track based angles, which are well covered kind of in section 1, that we can kind of attack, and maybe just to give you and I some more choice moving forward in terms of horses that we can look at and maybe back and track and do anything else. Which is always useful. So I thought I would have a look at, you won't be able to see what I'm typing in, but there's a box in the top right hand corner of Horse Race Space, where you can search different things, and I've just put in Fell in there because I want to have a look at Roger Fell. Jerry mentioned him a couple of days ago. He's kind of been on my radar as a kind of yard, possibly going places. And maybe a yard that we can track moving forwards. It's often can be a good idea to kind of try and latch on to new and upcoming trainers before everyone else cottons onto them, especially those that may fly under the radar. And Roger Fell would seem to be a kind of decent place to start, as he's done pretty well on the all-weather and the flat. So I've searched his name, as you saw there. I've just clicked on him. Within Horse Race Space, there's the kind of profiler tool where you can kind of look at recent runners and get some kind of generic information here, if you so wish. Putting a pound on all of his runners in 2017 in total. All codes would have lost you £70 there to starting price. As an example, you can kind of dig, and I will occasionally look at trainers and these kind of dashboards when I'm kind of making decisions about whether or not to tip anything, or if I personally want to have more on something. There's lots of different information you can see there. That isn't what I'm going to use today. I'm going to use the system building tool, which is V4, which is one of the system builders, or the kind of updated one with various different features, and that's the one I'm going to use. So if I click on V4, obviously for those of you who don't have Horse Race Space, these mechanics may not interest you so much, but you'll get to see my thinking, and hopefully there's going to be something of use that I rattle on about, that can get you thinking and applying to your own betting, or maybe your own research if that's your thing. So Roger Fell's uploaded here. I've suddenly now got access to all of his stats and all of his data. I have been through quite a lot of this once already. Otherwise, this video would probably go on for kind of 40 minutes to an hour if I did it all from scratch. But I'm going to whiz through. You can kind of see there, in terms of his number of runners, that's quite some progress in terms of building the size of your yard to have 83 runners in total in 2016. I'm not quite sure how many individual horses that is, but 83 runners, and then to jump to 362 in 2017. This would kind of indicate that this is a yard, well, a trainer who is ambitious and wants to go kind of one way. What I have here is a kind of breakdown tools, and this is what I use to kind of dig into various different, well, out of every different kind of angle you can think of, really. Those relating to the race that you can see there in front of you, digging into kind of the horse, jockeys, more information about the trainer, stallions, the horse's last race, second last race, their first ever run, etc. Now, the underpinning idea with any such research as this is, I suppose, I'm trying to find a micro angle, so I want as fewer bets as possible, really. I kind of want a winning strike rate 25% or higher. Ideally, probably 30% would be great for a kind of micro angle. Clearly very profitable to starting price and Betfair starting price, but most importantly of all, for any such micro system or system in general, there has to be logic underpinning every rule and every system and every bit of research should be kind of started from scratch in terms of the different criteria you may use. Building out and kind of building back in, which are that will what I mean there will come to life, I suppose, as I go through what I'm about to. But you basically just need to make sure that the angle you're coming up with has some kind of basis in logic, and there is some reason for why this particular train of behavior or angle that you may find should or may repeat moving forwards, because clearly we want to have some confidence that the horses we're going to back in real time or track in real time before spending too much of our real cash on them are actually going to perform, which is quite important. So with this angle here, as I tick around the 6 minutes, let's whiz through. The first thing I start with is kind of odds, just to get a feel, and also to help with the research and to kind of knock out any of those horses that don't really have much of a chance. Now we're looking at all runners here, just to get an idea. And if we just look at all runners that are 40 to 1 or bigger starting price, he's had 58 such runners since he started his training career. Only 3 have placed. Clearly one is going to win someday. But for the purpose of the further research, I essentially want to knock out or exclude all of those runners given the number of placed horses, just so that I am homing in on relevant stats and they're not skewed too much by horses that clearly have no chance according to the market. Importantly, when you go through and you're building angles such as this, you can add back in odds, you can delete odds, and you can actually get a feel for the kind of angles you should be homing in or not. So having got a feel for kind of odds at starting price, if I just click on there through to 33 to 1, that odds range covers, that starting price odds range covers all of his winners in that time. Clearly he's been profitable just on that basis alone, which is quite a good starting point, although clearly in 2017 you'd have lost some money, and those results are clearly simply pinned on a few monsters going in, which isn't a good foundation moving forwards really. I'll just have a quick sip of water. What am I ticking around to? 7 minutes. From there, I've kind of got a few things in my head. From this kind of point, I will then be looking at race type to get a feel. You know me, I generally focus on handicaps, or nearly exclusively really, in terms of my own punting and horses I want to home in on. You can kind of see there. Here we're talking about standard handicaps. That's what I base all of my stats on in section 1 for the flat. I exclude handicap sellers, handicap maidens, handicap nurseries. But you can see there is kind of runners, non-handicaps. They're kind of going to be graded affairs for the odd runs that he's had in them, I think. And you can see his various different types there. So if I click on handicap, that's where I want to focus most of this research. We've got the odds there. We've got the handicap. You can see that basis. They are still performing. This actual versus expected 4% below market expectations. Anything above 1 is generally a good indication on that front. There are a few other kind of mechanisms on that front I should start using. I know a few of you have discussed kind of impact value and cheese scores and various different other methods, which I probably should get my head around in order to improve my own research, but I haven't done that as yet. So I will use AE as a guide for now, and the kind of idea of having logical rules underpinning any such angles. So we've got that. I just want to have a look and break down by code. So there I'm looking at all weather and flat just to get a feel. You can see there in terms of profit, it's been on the all weather. That would suggest horses are kind of go under the radar a bit, or he's had actually his big priced winners have tended to come on the all weather. You can see by the placed percentages that actually and the winners, they're all kind of, the percentages are similar are in line, so there might not be much there, bar just kind of luck of the odd big price one going in on the all weather as opposed to the flat. For now I will just leave that there. I started this off with flat research, which is where I want to create micro angles for the flat, so we'll just start there, but I'm actually going to build out, and the angle I've honed in on is for both codes actually. Next I wanted to look at, well, I flicked through many different things and you can play around with lots of different things. I know in the back of my head that Tony Hamilton's ridden quite a bit for him, and I did therefore jump straight to jockey. But you could, from that starter set of stats, then dive into all kinds of different angles if you wanted and try and build up a kind of picture. If I just look at jockey and kind of sort by wins high to low, you can see there who the main man is in terms of bookings. But he's also had some other ones as well. I mean, you could, given the stats, actually just focus on Hamilton. Sylvester de Sousa, who isn't booked very often, and PJ McDonald seems to have got some decent rides as well. Sanderson, I assume, was a claimer, wasn't he? Was he £8, £10, £5? Probably ridden a few kind of donkeys, for want of a better word, in order to build up his riding experience. But you can see there's kind of bookings there of different jockeys. You could, I suppose, just focus on those that have had kind of one win. So for now, let's just focus on those three. Tudhope, Mulrennan, who are classy jockeys. And we've got two here that have had a win. Beasley, not too well, and Sanderson. If we just ignore those for now. And there suddenly, I suppose, you've got a kind of set of stats which suddenly looks a bit more palatable in terms of the jockeys that Roger Fell has booked. And again, we're with any training round where you're trying to tap into their behaviour and trying to work out their MO and what they're doing with certain horses and why they do certain things. And clearly jockey bookings is one of those things. Jockey bookings can be dangerous, especially if Tony Hamilton clearly started riding for him a lot last year, I suspect, combined with probably going down the pecking order at Richard Fahey's, where he used to ride a hell of a lot, and obviously Roger Fell getting more horses. So it could be that he actually just generally now moving forwards rides more horses rather than his booking being significant, if that makes sense, and therefore that is something to keep an eye on. But with those lists of jockeys there, we've kind of got those the odds range. I have noticed before, and I've kind of dive in here, you can get the feel for those that are kind of well supported. And generally, I mean, obviously it makes sense that he's going to have more winners at a shorter price because they're shorter in the market for a certain reason. And clearly he's had some bigger prices there. If I look on all those horses with those jockeys in handicaps, flat handicaps that have been sent off at 9-1 or bigger starting price, suddenly you've got 5 from 73. They've performed okay in terms of profit, okay in terms of actual versus expected. Clearly that's going to be a long time between drinks that may be profitable. So you could, if you wanted, just focus on those that are 8-1 or shorter. Again, that's at starting price, so if you're betting the evening before or early in the morning, you have to take some kind of general temperature check, but they are useful to know for that purpose. And there you go, you can kind of see those stats as we start to build up a bigger picture. What I wanted to have a look at, I suppose when I was going through, there's different things in my mind, and I have flipped through various different angles. I want to just delete the odds for a moment. Again, this is about building out and building back in. So suddenly I've looked at the odds with these certain jockeys, and yeah, those sent off 14-1 or bigger. There's a couple of winners at 33-1, which we'll try and snaffle later on. Suddenly, though, with these jockeys, 12, 11-1 might look a bit better. So you could, for research purposes at this stage, kind of put an artificial odds cap on of 12-1 or shorter, just to kind of home in on where most of the profit is. From here, you can look at many things. I have flipped through various different angles. You could look at age of horse, just to get a feel on that. Again, no logic there. There's no real logic why you should exclude 4-year-olds. You can't just look at something and go, oh, it's not profitable. If you look at the place percentages, and the placed horse is 37%, there is no reason why you should exclude 4-year-olds and keep 5-year-olds based on those stats there, just because they haven't been profitable. is not the reason to do so, in the context of those placed horses and the fact that he does well with 3-year-olds and with 5-year-olds and older. You may want to look at age restrictions because, as we know, there's handicaps, there's different types, 4-year-old and older, 3-year-old only. Which is decent enough actually if you just look at that. 5 from 13, 7 places, so quite targeted within in his 3-year-old only handicap. So at this stage we could be building up a picture of things you may want to keep in the back of your mind to dive in when you've got to start the set of qualifiers. So 3-year-old handicaps may be one of those places, given he's 5 from 13. 7 places, what profit is he? 36 at Betfair SP. That's within that starter set of those jockeys, flat handicaps, and standard handicaps. Remember, they exclude maiden handicaps, selling handicaps, 12 to 1 or shorter. Next, what I wanted to have a look at, well, there's various different things. Fitness is always one of interest, obviously. You can look at days since run. Where have we got? If we scoot down here, and you can see various different things there. Horses with those jockeys riding 46 days or more as yet haven't won in handicaps, but that's quite a small sample and a few have placed. Of more interest, maybe runs this season, which is something I looked at, and that's this flat season. So they may, or all-weather season. It is dependent on the seasons how Horse Race Space looks at it. And there's various different things you could look at within this different starter set. And you can kind of see the win percentage jump up from when you've kind of had 3 or more runs this season. But again, the place percentage is there. But if you looked at kind of hard fit horses that had quite a few runs this season, you can kind of exclude 0 to 1, so it would just fire out 3+. Suddenly you're kind of reducing the number of bets, driving up kind of profit and driving up win percentages. And you can kind of see there an example. He hasn't yet had a runner under such rules yet this year. What else I want to look at? So each kind of rule there from that starter set, you can kind of build back out and build back in. What do I want to do here? Yeah, I listed those jockeys there. I'm going to build back out actually while I'm here, and just for now focus on Tony Hamilton. Because he is clearly the main man to go to at the moment, given the number of horses he's ridden and the number of winners. So we're building out, we're building in. If I exclude odds, that's the starter set for all of his flat handicappers. You can see those stats there. We could actually then, again, I'm using the same phrase I know, kind of build back out and build back in. It's a constant kind of refining process, I suppose, where you are deleting angles, you're building back in to try and make sure, I suppose, you're not backfitting and you are not kind of compounding the research, if that makes sense, to ensure you're not kind of digging in within a smaller and smaller set of stats, which may actually kind of skewer what's going on and make them less and less relevant. Anyway, we can see his profit there for the all-weather. Again, he's probably ridden some biggies, so let's just leave the all-weather in. So that's a kind of decent starting set for Tony Hamilton riding Roger Fell handicappers, 16% above market expectations. I'm ticking around to 18.5 minutes. The idea is now I want to improve on those stats. So when Tony Hamilton is riding, we've got those horse runs in a season. We haven't looked at odds yet with him riding, so let's have a look. Again, you can see there kind of 23 to 1, 22 to 1 and 33 to 1 has been fairly profitable. He's had other winners at other prices, focusing on those that the market suggests are going to go well. It could be the Roger Fell is a kind of betting and punting yard also, and that when they really fancy one, or it goes off at kind of short, the odds 8 to 1 or shorter, suggesting it's maybe got more of a competitive chance, or it's in a race it can do well in, or something or other along those lines. That could be a place to focus. If I exclude those odds and just dig a bit more, this is kind of the process I go through as I refine and think, and you're kind of half seeing it live, and I'm half thinking as I go along. If we look at those horse runs per season, or this season again, this is what I focused in, and you'll see what I kind of saw earlier. When Hamilton rides, he kind of those that have only had 0 to 1 run this season. So this will be for those that are running on the flat turf. That will be this flat season. So that will be since Doncaster's first meeting of the year. That is when Horse Race Base does it from. The horse may have had a few runs on the all weather and had a few runs this calendar year, but in terms of runs this season in said code, that's going to be what this is. So 0 to 1. You can see there 0 from 46, only 7 have placed. It's not unreasonable to kind of exclude those, and there's logical sense there, because we're looking at horses that are either hard fit, they've had a couple of runs this season, or they've had a couple of runs on whatever surface that is. If they have, say, been on the all weather and they've switched back to the turf, or they've been on the turf and they're kind of then running on to kind of the winter or weather season. We have that as some logic there. So if I click 0 to 1 and exclude, so this angle will basically look at those that have had 2 or more runs this season within handicaps, and that's however Horse Race Base defines a season, which I think I'm correct in what I said before, but I might not be. But that's one of the joys of saving a system on something like Horse Race Base or another system builder, because it will fire out the relevant qualifiers, which is always important. So there we have suddenly a kind of better basis. We've got 17% win strike rate. We've got profit £133 to kind of £1 bets at Betfair. Starting price, that won't include commission. They're performing 50% above market expectations based on their starting price. We can then break down again by race code if we so wanted, just to get a feel for that. You can see the strike rate's a bit higher on the flat. We can break down by age restrictions again, just to get a feel for what's going on here. We can break down by odds again if we so wanted to get a feel, and you can just kind of see constantly going through and working out where best we can focus. The other thing I looked at to kind of home in on an angle here is the official rating versus their last race, which I will just kind of look into here. And you can kind of get a feel for this of where Roger Fell generally does well, and that's those horses that are running at the same official rating, or they've been dropped in the weights from their last run. That makes logical sense. Clearly a horse that's gone up in the weights, it may have done so because it won last time out and therefore it's been overbet or has to move up in class, or in any case it's going to have to improve again, certainly from its last run, because it's gone up in the ratings. And those that are kind of running at the same or lower, it would make sense that maybe they have more of a chance, or they're running at the same level again, or they certainly don't have to do something different necessarily in terms of winning off a higher mark. You can get a feel for just looking at all of those runners within this starter set that are running on their next start with their official rating £1 to £70, £75 higher than their last run. Obviously, some of those will be maidens that didn't have a mark and suddenly have a handicap mark. But you can see there, 2 from 32, 8 places, not doing too well, losing 22 to starting price on £1 bets. There's logical reasons for why you may exclude those. What I will also look at is how the horse finished last time out. Do we want to focus on those horses that clearly showed a level of form and ability, kind of placing, or do we want to focus on those that may not have placed and therefore may go under the radar? He actually does okay with Hamilton in terms of ones that won last time out and came second in terms of the place stats. You could, if you look at first, second, third and fourth, if you kind of look at top 4, again, you can see some stats there, 7 from 65, 20 places. Again, that will in part possibly be linked to the OR versus the last race in terms of, to a point, some of them still running the same and lower. Others are going up within the handicap, no doubt, for having won or placed near a horse that subsequently won or did something or other like that. So there's different ways you can kind of dig into that. So you could just focus on, let's say, those that finished 5th or worse last time out. As is generally the case with form analysis, many punters will if you're in the betting shop or using the newspaper, whatever, will look at well, still many will still look at the kind of numbers next to a horse, and you invariably focus on those that are kind of obviously got kind of ones or twos or threes next to their name, which happens, of course, and clearly the bookies will be focusing on those as well because they may be evidently more in form and their prices might be shorter than they should be, as an example. But if I just ignore the top four, so again, here you go, you reduce the number of bets. We've got the horse has had 2 or more runs this season. It's in a handicap. Tony Hamilton's riding. That's the normal handicap, remember, standard handicap. Kind of finished 5th or worse last time out. And you can suddenly see there you've got the kind of basis of a decent micro angle, I suppose, with not too many bets, and rather profitable. If you look at the return on investment at starting price of nearly 200%, of Betfair starting price 235%, that's fairly good. If I then break that down by race code, you can see there on the all-weather, that's 5 from 17, 8 places. And on the flat, fairly decent also, 3 from 6 in 2018 to date. You can click on the qualifiers and have a look at the horses that are winning. You can check, you can click the winners and show all. And again, with any types of angles like this, I want to be making sure that there isn't 1 or 2 horses that are dominating the stats. That can happen with smaller yards. You can find 2 or 3 horses that have won 4 or 5 races on a bounce, say, and then suddenly you get to this stage and you realise you've actually only been looking at 2 or 3 horses, which is annoying and doesn't give you confidence moving forward that the said angle may be repeated, which, as I harped on about at the beginning, can be quite important. What else do I want to say? Well, yes, we've got within that set, within those 5th or worse last time out, I can look back again at the overall rating versus last race. And again, actually, none of them have been sent off higher. So you're looking at one or the other, really. You can, look at that. Actually, focusing on those that are 5th or worse last time out might be the place to do it rather than the official rating versus last race, which does include a couple of winners as well. So you may want to, that would exclude that. Whereas I think focusing on those that were 5th or worse actually includes those couple of winners, and the results are probably not too much different if I focus on that, as you can see there. So you could just look at those with the same rating or lower last time out, and I'm starting to kind of go over myself as my words try and come out of my mouth and I try and think about what I'm looking at the same time. But yeah, again there, so actually let's have a look at the first 4. So they're profitable actually by looking those that finish in the first 4 but have not gone up on their official VHA mark. They're actually profitable, but you can see the number of bets there. So that's something you could focus on or just ignore. So we could actually just stick with those that are running at the same mark or lower. And importantly, then when I come to save these angles, I want to make sure essentially that I'm covering horses outside of that. So I would go to add instead of breakdown, if that makes sense. Official rating versus last race, which has now moved columns to there. What am I ticking around to 28 minutes? I can make sure that I am 145 lower to, let's find the same. Where are we? There. And that will just cover every horse that's running at the same or a lower mark than last time out. And you can see the stats there. So we've got fitness on our side and or familiarity with the surface, as in all weather or turf. And we've got Hamilton there and Roger Fell there. What else do I want to look at? Yeah, we've got the odds. And the general thing I want to look at with systems like this is making the rules as simple as possible, not having layers and layers and layers of rules, which can kind of skew different things and mean that they're kind of vulnerable to not repeating over time, or more vulnerable. What else? Is there anything else I can look at to kind of narrow down further? Odds again, which I've just ignored. You could like I said, 8 to 1 or shorter, and this is where you would note. So if I start posting these qualifiers, which I probably will do, you can know in the knowledge that if they're fancied and they're kind of 8 to 1 or shorter starting price, they have a 37% win strike rate. That means there's fewer bets. It's rather focused. It's across both codes when Tony Hamilton rides. Or you can look at kind of your knowledge of a certain area. So you've got 8 to 1 or shorter, or 12 to 1 or shorter, say, knowing that those that are 22 to 1 to 33 to 1, they're 3 from 10 3 places. So actually, knowing that these kind of bigger price ones do okay isn't a bad thing either. And clearly, some absolutely fall in at a price. So what I said earlier about odds. No, clearly I think they do know when to put the money down. I get the impression, but obviously there are times as well when they will have a big price horse fall in, and you can see that I just looked at the class of those, class 6, class 4. They might not have had much form at all. You could, if you wanted, exclude certain odds. If we had a look at, I mean, there's probably no logical reason, well, there is no logical reason, I don't think, to exclude kind of 14 to 1 to 20 to 1. But they're 0 from 17, 4 places. So you're kind of looking at the 8 to 1 or shorter, or the 22 to 1 to 33 to 1 is where the places where the profit has been. That's useful to know. He's clearly going to have winners within this odds range because they're very small samples we're talking about here. But that knowledge is useful, I think. So you've got that. We know 8 to 1 or shorter are kind of 37% win strike rate. I don't think there's many other ways. I'm just looking at my notes that you could dig further if you so wanted. The other thing I was going to look at, I have looked at breeding before. This is clearly nothing to do with the jockey, but you could reduce. He clearly knows how to source, and when you're looking at the origin of the horse for trainers, that could be to do with who their agents are, the markets that they like to buy horses in, their specific focus on certain bloodlines or stock that they know have done well in the past. The place percentage, say, would suggest this might be a bit unlucky. 30% is okay. You could exclude GB. Not necessarily systematically, but again, that's information that you can note down moving forwards in terms of if you want to have more confidence in a qualifier, or maybe have more money or more focus on Irish or USA bred, say. Again, that drives up the win percentage if you wanted to cut down the number of bets. But again, he probably will have a decent price winner that's GB bred at some point. What else did I want to look at finally? I'm ticking around to 32 minutes. So I was going to try and keep this under 20, but failed there clearly. Date. You can look at the days of the week, can be interesting. Some trainers can target Saturdays. Some will clearly have certain patterns of working patterns, and when they enter horses, possibly racetracks they like to target on certain days. Clearly, if you kind of win on certain days of the week before the handicapper takes note, you can run under penalties within the kind of next week and things before the official marks get revised. And if you kind of look there at days of the week, again, you could focus on certain things there. I'm not sure there's too much logic. Again, the placed horses would suggest there's no real logical reason to exclude any day of the week, but certainly Sundays, Mondays and Tuesdays he clearly seems to do quite well when Tony Hamilton's on board, as you can see there. But that's just an aside. Again, that's kind of information that you wouldn't necessarily put in as a set of rules systematically, but that you could note down and use for any such qualifiers to give you an idea. What else do I want to look at? Let me think. Oh yes, jockey. So we've got that starter set. We could just take off Tony Hamilton, and we can now just kind of go back into those jockeys that I looked at before. Are there any? Do we actually want to include more than Tony Hamilton? You can see there. Well, we know Hamilton does quite well. PJ McDonald, there's probably no reason to exclude him. I suspect he may have ridden on some of the all-weather tracks. There's no reason necessarily to exclude SDS. Connor Beasley's isn't necessarily the best. Ben Curtis has done okay. He's a very good jockey. Clearly, booking of Danny Tudhope's never a negative. Adam McNamara, I'm not sure if he stopped riding for him. There's no bad thing in focusing on those jockeys that have had winners for the trainer, because again, he might be more likely to use them moving forwards. and that just might be some indication. But clearly, there's jockeys here that have kind of ridden a placed horse from not many rides, etc., and that's something to keep an eye on. But again, you could just focus on that collection of jockeys within that set of rules, and we've built from both ways, from starting with the jockeys to back out. And you kind of have, I suppose, a decent starter set of system there, knowing what I said or have said throughout in terms of odds. And different places to focus. You can see there's a 3 from 9, so you could kind of the decent range is kind of 12 or 8 to 1 or shorter. So yeah, if I finish again by just looking at those 8 to 1 or shorter within that set there, you've got a decent 33% win strike rate, 98% above market expectations, 56% win and placed strike rate. For those of you who may like to back each way or have some confidence moving forwards, if we look down by race code, if I just have a breakdown again, you can see there, all weather's only 3 from 20, but 9 of place. That might just be a bit unlucky. But you can see the stats there with the fancied ones on the flat. 43% win strike rate. And again, you've got those odds that are a bit longer if you focused on those at 22 to 1 to 33 to 1, or maybe even bigger, given not many have tried. And he may have a 50 or 66 to 1 shot fall in, but you can see the stats there for bigger price ones. So that's something to go on there. Ideally, it's good not to be too restricted by odds, certainly at the upper end when it comes to micro systems and things, and use them as a guide where possible. But yeah, I think that's that as I tick around to 36 minutes. They're the kind of logical rules I focused on. There's plenty of logic in my mind for focusing on horses that have had at least 2 runs this said season in whatever code that is, and also those that haven't gone up with their official rating and still running at the same rating or lower as they were last time out. Again, like I said, you could look at the placing rule as well if you wanted, but there's no reason necessarily due to the place stats to exclude the top first, second, third, or fourth. But it may be interesting in the knowledge that those that you may want to focus on or refine your focus, if you so wanted, on those that finished 5th or worse last time out, and therefore may go under the radar a bit more of the bookmakers, as you can see there. So that's ticking around to 37 minutes. May give you some kind of idea on how my brain works. There are many different angles I could dig into before I'll put up that kind of main angle, I suppose, and try and start tracking it. Within the test zone, I think I'll also spend a bit more time pondering and digging and actually seeing if I can refine any of that, or if there's any glaringly obvious angles I've missed. I've spent 37 minutes just going through that, and that's having had one run through. I could probably spend another 30 minutes or 40 minutes actually delving into some of these other angles. It takes time in order to build a decent micro system, especially one based on trainer behavior, to try and get your mind into the minds of the trainer, and not be lazy with the stats you're looking at or the angles you're looking at, and trying to think of logical reasons for why a trainer may be doing what they're doing and why their results may be as such. And I'm still not perfect at it. Obviously, there's a lot of things I could improve on with such research, and I will keep chipping away. But hopefully, some of you who watch this extended feature-length movie may have picked up some aspects of that. And certainly, if you're a horse race space user, hopefully some of those things you may have found interesting. I should say within this start of the set, or if I just ignore go back to all those runners there, you can use the dig function. So you could actually you can dig and you can actually compare 2 angles to another. So I could look at the track and the jockey. So within that start the set of information, is there any are there any track combos? You can see there actually not too many. There's nothing there to go on necessarily, but that's the kind of different things you can do with these tools. While I'm thinking about it, there's something I haven't really looked at. You can look at the trainers, runners, on the day at the track. So if he's only sending 1 or 2 runners to the track, is that indicative of anything? Well, no, not really. Whether he sends 1 or whether he sends 3 or 4, there isn't actually too much there to go on or to exclude any such runners. But that's the kind of thinking and things you can look at. I'm ticking around to 40 minutes. I've been talking for far too long. It's nearly 9 p.m. I should probably have a hot beverage and put my feet up. I'll be back in the morning at some point to flick through everything. But yes, whenever you're watching this, and if you are watching it, I hope you found some of that useful. And until the next time, this is Josh saying bye for now. And yeah, thanks for watching and take care.